All right, greetings and blessings, everyone. I'm here to introduce our episode number 12 for the Rooster's Crow podcast. This episode, I spoke with Vin Armani, who is a very interesting person who I was just made aware of within the last week. And we had such a deep and edifying conversation. I'm sure you guys will enjoy it. Before I kind of introduce him, I'll give you a quick channel update. So I'm nearing about 1,000 subscribers, and I just wanted to say I appreciate everyone that tunes in. You know, I don't do this channel for income or for anything other than just to share my experiences, share my readings that interest me, and to engage in conversation and dialogue with people that I find interesting. I am blessed to have a job that is very rewarding. And I do this, just out of to share the love in my heart and to share what appreciates me with others. And I'm glad that it resonates with you. So I do feel the pull from the algorithm to produce certain type of content, but I try to fight that as much as I can and just stick to kind of, what touches me and what interests me, and hope it does with you as well. I've been collaborating with someone that I'll share with you with regards to creating a new logo for the Rooster's Crow. And what I've seen so far is just amazing. I can't wait to share it with you guys. Very symbolically rich and very kind of an awesome piece of artwork. I'll be sharing that probably in the next couple weeks here. So episode 12, I spoke with Vin Armani. He's written 3 books, and this guy, he is one of the most kind of popular and well-known gigolos. He was on a show on Showtime. I think it was called Gigolo. And this, as I say in the conversation, is probably the least interesting thing about the guy. I had a really great conversation with him. He's written 3 books. The first book was The Tao of Gigolo, which explored the nature of value. The second book he wrote was entitled Self-Ownership, The Foundations of Property and Money. And then at the end of that book, it led him to a kind of a deep dive into the philosophical guts of Bitcoin. And that is kind of the main background that he has. He's heavily involved in Bitcoin. And we talked initially about his new book that was just released, entitled Render Unto Caesar, Prophecy, Profit, and Proof of Work in the Dim Age. We really got into the concepts in the book, and we discussed a lot of interesting and kind of novel ideas, especially with regards to Bitcoin. We talked about early on his background in pickup artistry on the internet. He was involved really early on, kind of before the internet was really anything, before really search engines were kind of what they are today. And then we talked about the different resonances within our life, especially philosophy, and then alt spirituality, which we both had in terms of through our pathway towards Christianity. So we talked about our experiences with meditation, with lucid dreaming, and then especially with psychedelics. And we talked about how that led us to kind of this revelation of a mystical Christianity. And then through the scriptures, we both found the church fathers. And we talked a lot about our experiences with reading the church fathers and the effects that it had kind of in our lives. Prior to that, we talked about our experiences with spiritual entities through meditation and psychedelics, and what that meant to us, and what those experiences kind of felt like, and how they compare with experiences of the Holy Spirit and kind of true prayer. We talked about the Trinity as it's kind of resolved and involved with Bitcoin, and that's kind of what he deals with in his book, Render Unto Caesar. We talked about Jordan Peterson as a sort of John the Baptist figure and the effects that he's been having. We talked about Jonathan Peugeot and Symbolism, which we both appreciate very much. We even talked about the 10 Commandments as necessary for interplanetary citizenship. We talked about prayer and fasting. We spent a good amount of time talking about our experiences with prayer and fasting. We talked about finding a spiritual father. We talked about building community. And at the end, we talked a lot about Bitcoin and its potential for providing a kind of a new way of relating with each other in terms of value and in terms of money and in terms of the kind of the future. So a lot there. I want to thank Paul VanderKlay for having him on and bringing him, kind of to my attention and into my consciousness. So without further ado, I bring to you guys, and I will be linking to a couple of podcasts. I'll be linking to the Paul VanderKlay discussion he had, which goes into his background growing up, and then a conversation he had with Renegade University with Thaddeus Russell, to give you guys an opportunity to check out if you want to get really into his background kind of growing up. And I'll link to his books and some of his other stuff there. So now, without any further ado, I give you episode number 12 of the Rooster's Crow podcast, Mr. Vin Armani. Thanks for tuning in. All right, Mr. Vic Armani, thank you for joining me on the Rooster's Crow podcast.
It's Vin, actually, James.
Oh, Vin. Oh, it's Vin. I wrote that. Yeah, you know what? That's actually good, because I've never had someone come into my consciousness so quickly, and then me get an opportunity to kind of look into their content and then talk with them within less than a week. Like I saw you on Paul's podcast. He has these rando conversations where he has people come on. So I saw you pop on. I put my little earbud in. I'm working. I'm driving, and I listened to just right off the bat. You talk about a dream that you had with him in it. I'm like, oh man. And then your story took these twists and turns, and I was like, man. So I had to stop what I was doing and just listen. And then I listened to it again, and I'm like, man. And I reached out. I don't think I've ever done that, where I reached out so quickly. I'm like, I found your email address. I've been following Paul for a while and kind of running those circles in terms of the conversations I'm having. So it's that, it's that quickly that, you pop up here and shine forth. So
that's nice.
Vin,
well, they mean the same thing. I think they're pretty close. Vincent and Victor are kind of this. I think they basically mean the same thing. Victorious, right? So so they're both the same. They're the same word. So maybe there's something to that. That's interesting.
Yeah,
it's an interesting juxtaposition that it ends up meaning the same thing. So yeah, pretty cool.
Yeah, man. Well, I'll stick to your actual name, Vin. Sorry about that.
It's all good.
Thanks for joining me, man. And a lot of resonances when I was hearing you talk. A lot of different things and kind of your path. And we can get into a lot of stuff. I have some questions here, but
sure.
You've written 3 books: The Tao of Gigolo, which was your first book, Self-Ownership, The Foundations of Property and Morality, which is just, we could talk a long time about that. And then your new book is coming out. Has it come out yet?
It's out now. I just released it yesterday.
Okay. Your new book, Render unto Caesar, Prophecy, Profit, and Proof of Work in the Dim Age, right?
Yes.
And I listened to, you released an 8-minute kind of intro to it, which I got a lot of kind of insights or questions that I like to kind of connect with you with.
Sure.
And I'm going to link to Paul's interview with you and the one that you did with Renegade.
Renegade University. Yeah. Thaddeus Russell. Yeah.
Yeah. Which I watched a good portion of. So that'll go into your background and whatnot, because it's, you're in your background, you're one of the most well-known male gigolos. Right. And that's the most least interesting thing about you, which is saying a lot, man. My wife's like, you're talking to who? I'm like, never mind. Well, I'll talk to you later about it. So, but if you could just give us a quick, trajectory of how you got into philosophy, right? You're because I have a philosophy background. I got my degree in philosophy.
Same.
And then you into Bitcoin and Christianity. What are the resonances there between the 3?
Well, I think Christianity and Bitcoin are both applied philosophy for sure. So there's the interest there. I mean, if same with, my background being philosophy, my formal education. And so, there was a lot of exposure. That was actually my exposure to, I would say, real examination of scripture. So although I was raised at a young age in the church, the Episcopal and then evangelical, I really fell out with it pretty quickly, just because I was also interested in technology. My father is a tech entrepreneur. I was on the internet at a pretty early stage of it, early to mid 90s. I think 1995 was when I first got on, 94 and 95. And at that time, it was like hacker stuff was on there and alternate spirituality. Those are basically everything else was really not there. There was no Google at that time. Yahoo was, I think, hosted on like St. Louis University's site or something like that. There were, to give you an idea, at that time, Yahoo search engine, if you typed in the word sex, there were like 20 entries that came back. Okay, so, but if you're talking about alternate spirituality, if you're talking about hacking and all of these things, tons of stuff. And so I was interested in all of that. And it was knowledge that to a kid at that age in the pre-internet time, like, whoa, where else would I even get this? I mean, I was from a university town, San Bernardino. So, and my mother is an educator. And so I had been exposed even, and I knew how to like go down to the university library, and they have quite a nice library there. So go down to the university library, go through the stacks and whatnot. I knew how to do that, but still, this type of information was not there. Some of it was cutting edge, and some of it was, just not the type of thing that maybe you could find it in like a Ivy League school, because it was drawing from things that were considerably older than what you're going to find at California State University in a library, right? So I was very attracted to all of that, and so much of it was applied and embodied. So we're talking about information on how do you meditate. This is the first time I ran across Kabbalah, the tree of life. How do you do the Merkabah? And, how do you do that meditation to get things? And I said, wait, this is part of Judaism? What? I don't even, and my mind was just like, boom. And everything in church just seemed like, what?
Right.
What in the, no way, dude, you guys don't know anything about what's going on right now. Now that I have been exposed to orthodoxy and brought in through a spiritual father who's in a lineage of mystics, I understand, it's still in Christianity. Like, it's deep, and it's even better and more developed and more evolved through it hasn't stopped. The understanding hasn't stopped being evolved. The saints haven't stopped coming and revealing. And it's like, wow, this is, so now I'm into that. But on my trajectory, I fell off from the church, most definitely, and my entire life in many ways has been informed by that desire to have applied philosophy. Applied and embodied philosophy. So in my new book, I talk about the relationship between practice and theory, and how really, if it can't be practiced, if there's no way to do it as practice, it's not really a theory. And if there's no way to develop a theory about it, it's not really a practice. And so we see that in the Orthodox, when the Orthodox talk about theology, what I've loved to see just recently as I've discovered this is being introduced to all of these fathers who will just quite rightly say, listen, it's not speculative theology. Like, for us, you're not a theologian unless you are actually doing the practice and the experience that is giving you some exposure to theoria, and that is on the path to theosis. If you are not on the path to the embodiment of the theory, then you're not a theologian. And I'm like, yes, absolutely. Of course, every tradition says that, right? That it's not just looking as an observer, right? And I think one of the things, so materialists, the best example is sportscasters who have never played professional sports. And why do sports fans have such a visceral negative reaction towards sportscasters who speak authoritatively when they're sportscasting, although they've never played professional sports? There's a reason, and there's also a reason why somebody like John Madden becomes this legendary figure, having played and then been a coach, to be able to sit and speak authoritatively in the booth. And there's no question that what he's saying comes from authority. He's been on the field. Not only has he been on the field, he's marshaled the men. You've seen him actually take his theory, put it into practice, and win games.
Mm-hmm.
And that's even from a very materialist standpoint. And so my entire trajectory, and that carries through I didn't choose to become a gigolo. What it was that I ran across the pickup artist community, which was, again, another early internet phenomenon, which was happening in news groups. Mm-hmm. And started by this guy, Ross Jeffries, started a news group that was called alt.sex.seduction.fast. And basically what he said is, I figured out what the system is that basically equals seduction. Mm-hmm. He was like, I figured out the pattern that is going on psychologically, emotionally, spiritually, that as a man, you can walk up to a woman, do this pattern, and it will kick off all of the attraction things in her head. And then you will have seduced her. This is very interesting. If this exists, this is very interesting, but it was all applied. Mm-hmm. Because the proof is in the pudding. And so this community rose up, but I saw the same thing within the community. What I saw was there was a section of guys who were all about the theory. And one of the things that they started to do was they basically started to form churches. Mm-hmm. Where they, even though they were not good at what they did, they were not having successful relationships with women, they were charging thousands of dollars to guys for boot camps and workshops and all of these things where guys would come in and listen to them talk, and they would send them off with the theory. And none of these guys had success. Mm-hmm. And I ended up, I don't even know how it happened, but it was just providence, really, that I ran across this group of guys who had they had a private kind of secret group. All of the groups had like an online component, usually with what was the message boards back in that day. This is pre-social media. Mm-hmm. So they had a private, usually a message board, and then they would sometimes get together maybe in small groups. This one was very well organized, invite only, very private message board, and then regular sort of group gatherings of guys. And then as friends, go out and actually do these things. Mm-hmm. Very much about self-improvement. Very much about becoming the type of man that women are attracted to, rather than I'm going to go up and do some hypnosis on you and trick you for right now, which was mm-hmm. what a lot of guys wanted. That's what they were paying for. Mm-hmm. It was, no, I'm going to devote my life to understanding what it is that women find valuable, embodying that in myself, becoming someone different, and in so becoming, then I don't have to do anything because I am something. I am different. I am transformed. And so you could probably see within that practice that and this is something I talk about in the book also, is that it's like, if you are not having success with women as a man in this context, it is because you are sinning. Kata, it is because you are missing the mark. You are aiming for something and you are missing the mark. Now, what you want to develop is, 1, see the target, 2, hone my weapon, figure out if I've even got the right weapon, build the right weapon. 3, learn how to shoot. Mm-hmm. And then 4, develop focus. And through all of those things, and then practice. And through all of those things, you will be able to hit the mark. Now, this mm-hmm. is true whether it's sports, whether it's a professional career, whether it's being good with women, or whether it is your practice of Christianity. Mm-hmm. These are all it's all the same.
Yeah.
It's the same pattern. And so if you can do one, this is something I discuss in my new book. It's like, if you are a master of an unforgiving skill, if you master an unforgiving practice, you will be able to quickly master other unforgiving practices. Mm-hmm. Cultures have known this for a long time. The Japanese samurai, it was not acceptable for a samurai to simply be a master of the sword. Mm-hmm. It was also expected for him to be a master of calligraphy, mm-hmm. to be a master of flower arrangement, to be a master of Zen practices, because the idea was they are all you are learning. It is the practice and the pattern of practice itself that is important. It is not the given individual practice, right? So, so
it's
in
like
that, go ahead.
it's the appropriate mediation of heaven, Theoria,
Yes.
and earth.
Yes.
Right. And one of the things I wanted to talk about is I wrote down here is the 10 Commandments and interplanetary citizenship. Right. If those 10 commandments and understanding this idea of sin as missing the mark and aiming appropriately. And then when I started revisiting the 10 Commandments as not this archaic superstitious thing for silly people, as these are the base code of reality. If you just do these things, you can have bespoke realities of beauty in many different ways. And this is the code for you to develop interplanetary relationships. And it's like, yeah, don't lie, don't cheat, don't steal. Right. But we're terrible at it. You know, we're not even aiming appropriately or even understand that we're aiming, let alone that. So it's that idea of sin and the way that you articulated there is amartia, as missing the mark, is so important. If you ask somebody what sin is, just generally, oh, that means I'm a bad person. That means I'm sick. You know, I was born sick and ordered well by God. What kind of God would I have a relationship with that? It's that's key, man. And I think that's, I don't know if you follow Jonathan Peugeot and his work on symbolism.
For sure.
Symboli is a Greek word. Sin means to come together. Voli. So symbolism is when heaven and earth come together appropriately, right? And man is mediator between heaven and earth, right? And it applies to everything. So the samurai, he's expert at the sword. He's an expert at tea ceremony. He's an expert at calligraphy, right? And he's not, and it's this way of embodying the spiritual and the heavenly and the earthly appropriately that I think Jordan Peterson talks about beautifully. And he brought me, just to give you a quick background. So I had in 2015-ish, I was dealing with a lot of addiction. I was into Buddhism for about 5 years. I really got into it from integral theory, Ken Wilber, really got into that stuff. And then I found Taoism and Chinese medicine. I went deep. I started getting into Qigong, which is energy work. I did it kind of religiously, so to speak. And then, I had a 6-figure job and I had a wife and a son. And I said, you know what, I'm going to quit my job and I'm going to teach meditation and I'm going to teach energy work. It had such a transformative effect on my life. I'm going to do that. And along with that, I was into, meditation, lucid dreaming, astral projecting, psychedelic proselytizer. Psychedelics are going to change the world. If all the CEOs would just take DMT, then everything would kind of fix itself. And so I started a business called Trinity Energy Works, where I was going to teach people how to heal themselves. And terrible business decision. I was completely unrooted. I was completely ego, like self, a spiritual ego out of control. And I saw it as, I wanted just to help people. And my wife, she's a ICU nurse. I swear she's an angel, man. She stuck with me quitting my job, spending all of our savings trying to build this business and failing horribly. And then I found Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Peugeot, and then I found the church fathers and everything that I was searching for and looking for deeply in Zen Buddhism and in Taoism, especially Father Seraphim Rose and his work of Christ the Eternal Tao. So my YouTube channel started by reading that book from cover to cover. I'm like, holy cow, this saint had kind of this similar experience where he was really into Taoism, and then started reading the church fathers. I'm like, oh my God, here it is in its pure form. I'm like, wow. And then, things changed. I got back into the industry I was in, had another child. My last psychedelic experience was like 3 years ago. And it was, set my little intention. I put my little aromatherapy on, set my wife and my son. She was 8 months pregnant with my daughter at the time. And I took not a heroic dose, but almost a heroic dose that I grew myself. I just took it down, put my meditation music on, and lay down and doing my deep breathing. And cut to about an hour later, I'm just about to call my wife and tell her to take me to the emergency room. I'm like, my God, please stop. I had a little benzo that I took as a trip killer, didn't do anything. I've taken showers. I took 3 showers. I don't know if I was in there 5 minutes or 20 minutes or an hour. And I went in the backyard, tried to do work. I'm like, please just have this thing go away. And just a weird encounter with a many tentacled entity who was, engulfed me. I wrote it down in my journal. I really don't revisit it too much, but almost went to the emergency room, almost called my 8-month-old wife, pregnant wife, to say, hey, take me to the emergency room. that was the last time I did that. Right. And don't mess with psychedelics anymore. And then I found the church fathers and was rooted back into Greek Orthodox. My parents moved here from Greece. I was literally the cutoff point from my entire lineage being Greek Orthodox when I fell away from the church. I haven't been to church in 25 years. Last couple of years, I've been trying to get back into it. You know, since COVID hit, been having a couple of conversations with a priest at the old church, and I'm looking for a spiritual father. I went just the day before yesterday to a Orthodox monastery that was created by Saint Ephrem in Ocala. I went there and it was just a great experience, man. So a lot of resonances there of falling away and now coming back and then finding the church fathers and then getting these insights of what sin is, and then rooting that out into all these different areas in life and what that can do for you. So I just wanted to share that. I wasn't aware of those resonances that we had there as well, man. So and the kids kind of changed everything, man. That father-son relationship, that daughter-son-father relationship's like, oh wow, okay. It makes you understand, you know, on earth as it is in heaven. You get a little insight into what that is by that down here, you know.
Yeah, that coming into consciousness, watching a being come into consciousness is, I don't know what kind of person you have to be for it to not be transformative. But at the same time, the spirit is moving in the body as well. So measurably, obviously in women, but measurably even in men, there's all kinds of biological processes and changes that are taking place the second that baby goes into your arms, the day that it's born. Measurable. Like there's no argument from science in terms of our hormone balances change, which then changes. And the materialist talks about, oh, well, all of this is mediated by hormones and all of this, but the Eastern mystics have associated the glands with a connection to the heavenly for a long time. So it's that the spiritual body is interacting with the physical body through the glands. It's not that, oh, well, this can be explained by hormones. And it's like, can it though? Like, can you explain why those hormones have been created at this specific time? Like, can you give and they can't give any causal, explanation of it. But let's just deny the thousands of years of spiritual teaching from literally everywhere in the world that associates the gland and it's not like they haven't known about glands and hormones. This is thousands of years old if you go to Ayurvedic medicine. And it's all in there. And then Chinese medicine as well, and the association with the chakras and all of this. And so it's like to deny that the spiritual, however you want to describe that, even as a materialist, you've got to say, well, we don't understand these systems, right? We don't understand them. So yeah, man, it is there is so much. And also, Seraphim Rose obviously is a great example of somebody coming from this. I mean, he studied with Alan Watts, and where it's like, when I learned that, I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. Yep. And then, my spiritual father introduced me to Saint Sophrony. His Life is Mine. If you haven't read that book, is fantastic, especially if you're getting into the Jesus prayer, is life-changing. And he came from, and he's a modern saint. He was just canonized a few years ago. And he came from transcendental meditation. That was where he came from. So the connections, they lead you to these are seekers, right? People searching for the embodied spiritual who don't find it in the Western church, who some of them fall away from the Eastern church, maybe because the mysticism has been pushed to the back in some places, perhaps more. And perhaps that's just the ebb and flow of things. We're in a materialist world. So of course that's going to happen. And it's not necessarily exposed to you at an early age, which it shouldn't be. You should have to find that on your own. And so, here's the East, the Far East, India, China. Oh, there's still this embodied spirituality. Let me go into that. But then as a Westerner, having the Christian metaphor playing out within your entire being and living inside of it, whether you know it or not, eventually, if you're introduced to the real Christian mysticism and the church fathers, and you really understand that the history of the church is a mystical one, that how many of the saints you look at and you were like, that saint's life is straight out of like Lord of the Rings, like whoa, fighting demons and casting, like whoa, this is my spiritual father just introduced me to Saint Cyprian. And I was like, whoa, this dude was a sorcerer. He had demons that he was calling, and he got into a real fight with the devil, and then it's like, whoa. And then this dude became a bishop and a martyr. And it's like, why did I not know this? Why did I not know that this was the history of the church that I was introduced to as a child? Why is this being hidden from me? This is the truth. Why is this being hidden? This is crazy. And can I trust anyone in the church who would hide this from somebody or who doesn't know it?
I never heard of the Jesus prayer until about a few years ago. And my family, I went to church when I was younger, right? And, the Jesus prayer is something that I've been working with, and I taught my son it, and we do it every day at night. And it's, I had this Orthodox monk on, Father Seraphim Aldea. He is out of Mole Monastery, and I talked with him, and I was talking about, the fathers say that you're not really praying unless tears are coming down, right? And I'm like, how do you do that? And he's like, that's, you don't do it. It's a gift. It's grace. And this happened to me for the first time day before yesterday. So we have this monastery was built. It's a shrine. It was built 80 years ago in Tarpon Springs here in Florida. It's a shrine to Saint Michael. The story behind it is, or Archangel Michael, is beautiful. There's this icon of Archangel Michael. It's 500 years old that sits there. And the Greek lady that built the shrine went to Greece, had a son that had brain cancer, took the son to Archangel Michael. Long story short, he was healed. She asked to bring that icon back and brought the icon back and built a shrine around it. So I took my son there the day before yesterday, and we went there and visited and did a little prayer there. I made a little video about it. And then I dropped them off to school, and I went to that day. I'm like, I'm going to the monastery. It's 2.5 hours away. I wasn't aware of it until about a month ago when I was at a restaurant that I went to for the first time. And right before I was about to eat my food, I did my cross, and the owner comes to me, or some guy comes to me, and he's like, where are you from? I was like, I work down the way. He's like, no, I saw you do your cross. Where are you from? I'm Orthodox. So we started having this conversation. We exchanged information. He gave me information about that monastery, blew my mind. He gave me 2 books. One was, I have it right here, St. Nicholas and the 9 Gold Coins for my son. And he gave me the book, what's it called? The Pilgrim, The Art of the Pilgrim, I think it was. I can't remember the name of it right now, but it's something that I've...
The Way of the Pilgrim?
The Way of the Pilgrim, which is something that is on my list to purchase. I just haven't gone around to it. He gave it to me. But anyways, he told me about the monastery, and I ended up going there day before yesterday, and I spent a couple hours there. I wanted to speak with the monk there, the air monk, but I didn't have time. I had to go back and get my son. So I didn't, I'm like, it's not my time yet. I'm going to come back just to get guidance. But on the way there, I was doing the Jesus prayer. I was listening to it. I had this kind of chant of it, and I started crying, like tears started coming out of my eyes. And I took my camera and I did a little video of it, and I don't know why. And I'm like, should I post this? But I was bawling my eyes out, like literally, like, while driving in traffic kind of slowly. So I was trying to hold back the tears, but also kind of let them go. That's a powerful prayer. And if you stick with it, it will, it's like a mustard seed that's planted in your heart, and it will grow eventually. And it will, in its own time, the Holy Spirit will act in you, right? Because if it acts too fast, you could have a really challenging and with your relationships or with your work or with your current self, right? So it's breaking away slowly.
That is so true.
And you have to stick with it. So that when you mentioned the Jesus prayer, I don't know what your experience has been with it, but it's something I do many, many times a day. Yeah.
Yeah. It's that is the core of my, the system of prayer that I've developed. It's based around that. So I do morning prayers on the beach, and then usually in the evenings. And so I do that solo every day that I can. I'll do the beach, and then twice a week there's a group of us here that do go and pray together. And then in the evenings, I will my evening prayer, I'll pray the Chakti, and I'll also do the Jesus prayer as well. So it's that was the transformation for me. It was almost like that prayer as the root and foundation was how I came to actually be able to understand what prayer was supposed to be, basically, and what it could deliver. Because, I mean, and you have a similar experience, so you are used to, and you can identify that movement into the celestial space, right? When the veil comes down, you know exactly what I'm talking about. First you see the veil, it becomes apparent, and then it opens and you go into it, right? You know exactly what I'm talking about. So I had never had that. I mean, I had worked hard to achieve that in practices of meditation, particularly going after astral projection and lucid dreaming, right? Working very hard to achieve, make the veil come down, open the veil, split the veil, go into it. With this, it was with getting into that practice, getting used to it, and then really going into the prayer, not just as a form, not just as a mantra, because I had learned mantras in the past and they're helpful, not as a mantra, as a vehicle. So inside of it, inside of the prayer, and then the veil comes down. Oh boy, like it comes down fast. And then the difference is that, like, then the Holy Spirit, the intimation first, and then if on occasion when you're lucky, the feeling of being filled, you know, when you're lucky, and it's in those moments that I've had that emotional release as well. And that emotional release, interestingly enough, I mean, that's so common in ayahuasca ceremonies, the purge. And so people purge, you know, they usually will throw up, but a lot of people cry, weep, sob uncontrollably. And it's known by the practitioners and the shamans that, yes, this is purgatory, meaning a purging, right? So this is a purging that is occurring here. And that I think that is an emptying out of yourself due to being filled with the Holy Spirit. So, you know, it's you as a vessel, and then those tears are that which is being displaced, and that's a good thing, you know, that you've agreed to take on the Holy Spirit, that it's coming in, and then the tears are, you know, you're being filled up, and so something has to come out, right? And so yeah, man, it's beautiful. And
well, I've had those energetic releases doing you know, energy work and meditation. I never done ayahuasca, but even the psychedelic, you know, you're entering the spiritual space, right? You're entering a space that you don't have the capacity, the wherewithal really to orient yourself towards, right? So you can encounter entities that are very loving and healing, and they will heal you, right? But there are entities out there that will slam you down, right? And let's say you get emptied out, right? You release a lot of old trauma. What are you going to fill it back in with? What happens after?
Exactly.
What happens, you know, and that was the big difference of, and I heard you and Paul talk about, you know, the community aspect of it and what happens after, and what do you do? And Paul talks about, you know, Jordan Peterson goes, and I went and saw him live. He talks to these people, he fills them with all this, he gives them encouragement, and is a spiritual experience that he has with them, and then he leaves. And then they go back to, you know, with all that's opening, you know, what can come in now could be just as traumatizing, you know? So I don't know how to really think about that really yet, or how to correlate the two. You know, the idea of you could do energy work and have these experiences. You can do ayahuasca, you can take psychedelics and have a spiritual experiences, or, you know, are they the same as, you know, prayer and repentance? Are those the same?
Well, I think that it's the same it's the same, it's the same process or pattern, but it is not, well, this is what I say, it's the I've been saying recently, the vessel is not the contents. What I see over and over and over again is that people are unable to discern the difference between the two. And so it is preparing, all of those things prepare the vessel. And those of us who have had those experiences understand that while, you know, meditation, psychedelics, sweat lodge, brain injury, near-death experience, all of these things are doing something similar in terms of the pattern of how they align the vessel to enable the contents, new contents to come in from external, right? Because we know and we feel when we have enough experience with this that it is not happening inside of our physical body. As much as the materialists may want to say that, they say that because they've never experienced it. Once you experience it, you understand. And especially when you start talking to the other entities and they start interacting with you, you're like, this is not me. Right. I know the difference between my voice and somebody else. This is not me. I'm not thinking these thoughts. I'm being told these things. And I think that what we see, and this is yet another part of something that has been a realization for me in this whole process, is that the tradition that is the Christian tradition is a communion and a covenant with a particular entity that, as we have evolved over the generations in our spiritual practice and our understanding of how to build the vessel properly, how to maintain the vessel properly. And you see this vessel metaphor over and over. The ark is a vessel, both Noah's and the Ark of the Covenant. And you'll notice that it's specific. God says specifically, here's how you're going to build the vessel that will contain me. Here's how you're going to do it. And this is the same thing that the ayahuasca shamans say about how they learned how to cook the ayahuasca brew. Because the brew is the vessel. It's not coming from the brew. The brew aligns the spirit so that aligns your vessel so that the spirit can come in and do what she's going to do. But she's a separate entity from that. It's just like tuning a radio. Yeah. And so what we come to is this ancient tradition that's not just 2,000 years old, because it's drawing upon what was already known. It's standing on the foundation of back to the first man. It's standing on the foundation of the same entity that Noah was speaking with, that Abraham was speaking with, that the prophets were speaking with, that Moses was speaking with, all of it. And then the addition of, here's this, God says, here, I'm going to give you this new tool. You weren't able to get it so far. So I'm going to actually become man. Here, I'm going to actually manifest so that I can give you a conduit to get to me, because you're having a difficult time. You're not able to pull it off. So here you go. And so what we have is we have something that is so much more evolved and has been evolved in a systematic way in terms of, here is the method for making the vessel and for the contents to come in. And it's just like, probably can the Holy Spirit get in with those other systems? I would say probably, but they're not specifically tuned for the Holy Spirit. You know, can the Holy Spirit get in with the ayahuasca brew? Probably, but it's not tuned for him. It's tuned for Mother Ayahuasca to come. And so I guess that's kind of like, if that's where I would get at your question is, are they the same thing? It's the same thing in that they are all moving the tuner, but they're not moving it all to the same frequency. And the Holy Spirit is the frequency to where you start letting the Holy Spirit in, and literal miracles happen in your life, to where you're just, I don't even, this is crazy. This doesn't even, what? And then that's how you're like, okay, it's all real.
It feels like
that's how it was for me.
The synchronicities happen. You feel like you're in a dream real quick, where it's like this fluid thing happens. You're like, no way. You're like, this is crazy. Like, and then you have to try to tell like your wife about it, and or like show actual proof. And then your wife, who's, you know, my wife, she's not, you know, she's like, wow, like she'll see stuff, and it's just recently a lot of stuff like that's been happening. But let's double click a little bit on the idea of the Logos becoming man, right? So all of these disparate religions and kind of ways of understanding the world, the Nordic, the Hebrews, the pagans, the Zen, the Buddhists, right, and the Taoists, right? These are all seeds of the Logos, right? They are not like this big insight is that they're not wrong, they're incomplete, right? And just like you were saying, when the Logos became made man, right? So what did the shift from, you know, at least from my experience, I thought of God as you know, or this energy in the universe is kind of, but God is a person. The Logos is a person you have a relationship with. And that was a you know, it was an interesting experience wrapping my heart around that, is that when you're praying to someone that loves you like you love your child, but in a higher dimensional way of understanding that. And it's like that kind of concept of God became man and was crucified. Like, you believe that? Again, another thing, when you said, I don't believe in God, I would say that I'm like, I don't believe in God. When Jordan Peterson would say, I act as if God exists, and everybody would give him shit for it, I'm like, he's more onto something there than he said, oh, I believe in God. It's like, because it's not a belief. Like it's not an argument. It's, you know, so when you said that to Paul, like, do I believe in Paul VanderKlay? I'm like, oh my God, I got to talk to this guy. Like, you know, I haven't heard somebody articulate it like that, you know? So tell me a little bit, what do you mean? Like, how does the Logos work in your life? How do you see that idea of Christ, of a person working in your life?
And I do want to preface it as, when I say this, I am not a theologian. That's the first thing I want to say, right? Like, it's very important. I am not a priest. I am not a theologian. I want to preface everything that I'm saying is that this has been my experience, my understanding, and what has been revealed to me relative to all the other things that I have done, right? So in many ways, it's how does it differ from other experiences that I have had? And part of that experiential aspect has been, as you have, I have communed with other spirits in a manner to where there is no doubt in my mind that there are other entities. So when I deal with this particular entity using prayer, a system of prayer, that I am going to speak about my impression of that entity. So I want to get that out of the way first, right? And so I'm not trying to, I may say something and people, and I mean, already in my conversation with Paul, like, comments about it is like, people are like, that's not scriptural. That's not whatever. It's like, look, man, I can only speak from my own experience. If that goes against something that you've read, I'm sorry. I'm telling you what's in the room that I stepped into. You can believe I didn't step into the room, and that's completely different. Then let's not even talk. Then I'm just a liar, I'm crazy, or something. And that's something different, right? But I'm just saying, if you're going to disagree, let's talk about the room, right? Which is nice to talk with somebody like you, because you've walked into the room before, right? And so you know what's in the space, okay? So that's what I want to preface it from. I think one of the things that was an aha moment was reading Saint Sophrony, His Life is Mine. He talks about this personification. Why do you have to have the personification? And he says, and this is such the difference between Christianity and the Eastern, Zen, Taoism, you know, even going into, I think you get a little more of it in like the Vedic, like Hindu, they have the personifications. But the idea is, if there is no personification, then there can be no good and there can be no evil. There can only be natural processes. This is what Saint Sophrony says. And it's like, yes. And also you look at the Hebrew God and the relationship with the Hebrew God and the covenant. And so they're making a covenant with this thing, but this thing is so depersonified that you can't even say his name, its name. You know, you can't get much more. That is the symbol of depersonification. It does not have a name. Even God brought the animals to Adam to have him give them names, right? We even personify, even your pet has a name, and that's not a person, you know. But the further away from personhood you get, the further you believe that this is not a person, from the high level of the hierarchy down to the low level of the hierarchy, right? Every ant doesn't have a name in your mind, but probably every dog that's a pet, especially if they have a dog collar, what's on the dog collar? The name of the dog. Or at least it's the name of its owner. So at least it's equivalent of a slave, right? At least a slave has is personified in the name of its owner.
The dog answers to his name, right?
The dog answers to his name.
Yeah.
And so in the fact that he answers to his name, we are able to personify him. And then we are able to interact, and we are able to ascribe some motivation. So in a depersonified state, God is a force of nature. And when we make a covenant, and Jordan Peterson totally keys in on this. And I went to his August 1st biblical lecture in Toronto. And it was Abraham as father of nations. It was totally about the covenant. And he totally gets it. That he's like, you're making an agreement with the future. You're making a covenant with the future. But again, it's like this natural process. There's no motivation in it. God has no motivation. But that's what changes when God becomes man, because men have motivations. Human beings are pushing toward a goal. And so it should be no surprise that God becomes man. And what is his motivation? Well, it's the kingdom of heaven. And an articulation, a clear articulation of where are we going? What am I trying to do? Where am I trying to help you to get? And that's the most important thing, that then it's like, it's the kingdom of heaven, and this is the sovereign. This is the king of the kingdom of heaven. And so now you can serve the sovereign, but even better than that, the sovereign is the son of your father. So the motivation even extends higher in the hierarchy, that it's like, well, so when you're punished, it's for you to learn, and that the father wants you to repent when you've done something wrong. And that even if you are willing to repent, the prodigal son, if you are willing to come back to him, he will embrace you. He's ready for you to come back. And it's like, wow. So then you can get they're lost, and now they can be refound. It's not like forever lost and now I got to destroy you, because that's what the Jewish prophets were all about. It's like, you broke the covenant, guess what? Start over. It's not repentance, it's destruction. It's obliteration. Now, Israel, I will destroy you because you have broken the covenant. It's like, no, I become man so that we don't have to continue to have this destruction. So that, yeah, you broke the covenant, come back. Come back. I am the mediator, so that you can come back. Do what you need to do to rebalance the scales. It's about reciprocity. Do what you need to do to rebalance the scales to get back in the good graces. And I am going to tell you how to do that, so you don't have to be blown up and destroyed again. And what a powerful, what a gift. And how much better of a covenant is it if there's this mediator? Because we're going to break the covenant. Clearly, you can't go through the Old Testament and think that there's any chance of us as individuals holding to the covenant. But if you only get one shot at it, that's no good. And if you don't know the motivation, How much harder is it to keep the covenant if you're like, but does God have my best interest at heart, or is he just the Lord and I am his slave and I will be a good slave?
Mm-hmm.
Or am I his son and he loves me, and that is the reason why he's asking me to do this. And then also, if I will do it, he will reward me. It's not just about if I don't do it, he will destroy me. It's about if I do it, he will open up the material and the spiritual, and I can be there with him, and I'm on his side and on his team and in his army. And it's like, wow. And it's real. Like, that's the crazy part. Like, it's as real as anything I've experienced with any psychedelic, with any other practice that's like that. And those are incredibly real. And this is even more real because it extends so far into the physical, to where things in the mundane world happen in a way to where I'm like, wait, how did that just go so well? Like, there was no friction. Like, why does this just feel like all of the barriers are being removed? Somebody must be removing these barriers. And I think that you can get into a problem with that, because you experience that and then you turn into like a Joel Osteen, where you're preaching the prosperity gospel. But it's like, no, man, it's not about that. It's about he's clearing out the way so that you can give more to him. Like, he wants everything, but he's going to clear out the way for you to give him everything. Unlike the other entities that I have dealt with who lie, who give, but then they never tell you what they're expecting in return. And I think that this is a metaphor that people have used throughout cultures of selling your soul to the devil, or the man at the crossroads. Like, why do you go and meet the devil at the crossroads? That's from the African tradition. You go and you meet the devil at the crossroads, and then he gives you something. Tempts you. Well, and offers you. You can go and say, I want to be the greatest musician ever. And he, at the crossroads is where he teaches you the guitar. And then you come back and you are. But the answer is like, well, but you didn't continue the journey. He always stops you. The devil always stops you at the crossroads. The devil's not all the way down. See, God is down there with the real thing, but it's going to be a longer walk. The devil stops you at the crossroads, but he stopped Jesus at the crossroads when he was in the wilderness to tempt him. In the middle of his fast, that's the crossroads. And we're all I've seen it happen now so many times in my life when I've realized, oh man, your whole life you've been stopping at the crossroads because you didn't have discernment of, oh, this is evil, what's being offered to me. And instead I thought, oh, look at me. I'm so spiritually powerful that I can talk to the devil. Or whatever those entities are. Look at me. I'm so spiritually powerful that I can actually talk to these entities and they'll give me stuff. And they did throughout my life. And I've got the receipts in such a weird way, to where you're like, your life doesn't seem real. So literally when all this stuff started for me, where there were in the New York Times and Daily Beast, the articles about me and my colleagues was, this is not real. This is fake. This is being made up for TV. And it's like, nope, sorry. Because it's fantastical. But I know that it's because, I had met someone at the crossroads. And I look back now and I'm like, how would my life have been different? But again, here I have the chance, and I've been given the chance. And it's like, I don't stop at the crossroads anymore. I'm just thanks, but I'm going.
The crossroads to me, came to me like it's the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. We keep returning into it and keep getting some fruit from it. And it's delicious. And we get this knowledge of how to be an awesome pickup artist, of how to be an excellent guitarist, right? And you get all the pride and the all of the accoutrement that comes with it of becoming what that is, but that mostly leads to destruction almost 100% of the time, right? So discernment is like, I'm not going to eat from that tree. I'm going to put my sights, I'm going to aim towards the tree of life. That was my dispensation before the fall, right? Adam and Eve, before they fell, they were going to be given the fruit from the knowledge of the tree of good and evil when they were spiritually mature enough. And God's like, trust me. It's like you tell your kids, don't do it. Don't do it yet. Trust me. Just keep working, get immortality. get the tree of life. Once you get the tree of life, and the idea of death is, do you want to be sinning an immortal sinner, right? Death is a gift, for your soul, so you won't continuously go on sinning forever. And this idea of what is the kingdom of heaven? Well, what was Adam and Eve supposed to be like if they didn't eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? What is a world where you ate from the tree of life first and then you obtain the knowledge of good and evil? We are not adults. We are children. We are children. We don't become adults. Children are more closer to what we need to become than what we become when we become adults. And in playing in that space where you get to speak with entities, or I look at it and I explain it like this: it's like giving a child, a 6-7-year-old, an iPad that's unlocked, and they can just run free on the internet. It's beautiful. Look at these cool videos and these cartoons, but you happen to come up upon, some crazy porn site, and into your consciousness comes something that you are not ready for. Your nervous system is not ready to take what comes in, and it changes your life, and it traumatizes you intensely. Right. So it's like, you can play in these spiritual realms. Psychedelics, I was a proselytizer for years. Meditation, even, you're opening yourself up to beauty and a lot of wonderful things, but a lot of things you need to be careful. And if you don't have that discernment, watch out. Peterson says it, I think he's quoting Jung, be careful of unearned wisdom. You want that mystical experience? You really want it? God, you can't go close to God because you will burn. It's like, you don't want it. I mean, you want it because you're being tempted. You're smelling that fruit and it smells so fragrant, and you want it. And your friends want it. And the TV shows tell you that you want it. And the movies that you watch tell you that you want it. And your parents are chasing it. But what happens when you get it? What happens when you get it?
Yeah, that is, I mean, and I think this is the reason why acknowledging that there is a mystical tradition that requires of you a practice. How can I say this? Well, look, you and I sort of backfilled into orthodoxy. I mean, it's your like biological lineage and spiritual lineage from your family, but at the same time you had fallen away. Right. So it's like you had to backfill into orthodoxy. But I wager that, I mean, you wouldn't have backfilled into Protestantism regardless, from your experiences. Like, you wouldn't have backfilled into probably Roman Catholicism as it's practiced in the average church. You wouldn't have backfilled into many of the other forms of Christianity. But it's because there is something to be said. And this is something that I'm having a very difficult time, I think, explaining to people who haven't had these similar experiences. But it's like, there is very much something to be said for running across a multi-millennia old tradition. And this is why so many of us who have had these experiences go toward Zen or go toward Taoism, that it's like you run across the tradition and then you can just step into the tradition almost because you have the whole vocabulary. It's kind of the same way that somebody who's, let's say, a professional boxer and they want to go and fight in Ultimate Fighting Championship, but they've been a professional boxer, that they can just go and get jujitsu training. And you're like, whoa, in 6 months, he's awesome at jujitsu. And he's like, yeah, but he knows how to train for fighting. This is just, he's just training a different technique now. He didn't have to learn all of the fight training. He knows how to do a training camp. He knows the mental aspect. He knows how he has to treat his body. He knows the diet, all those things that if you just started with jujitsu with no fight training and you want to go pro, you have to learn all those things. See, so we don't have to learn to backfill to get ourselves centered and ready into prayer for it to not just be a form for us. And so to find a tradition that says, oh, it's here in our tradition, that the Jesus prayer is there, and that both of us who have had real experiences that have been chemically induced to a certain degree can say, oh yeah, this prayer, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner. Because people are listening to us and we say, oh, it's a powerful prayer. And they're like, what are you talking? what are you talking about? Like, what do you, and I'm like, no, it's like crazy powerful. Like, even if you don't know what's happening, a Catholic friend of mine was like, oh, I've started to do that. And then he was like, yeah, I was laying down, I did a prayer to St. Michael. And then he was like, I started doing it when I was chopping wood. I did a prayer to St. Michael. And then I've been practicing the Jesus prayer. And then all of a sudden I got a vision of a chapel that I should build on the north end of my property. And like, it was exact. And I even got up and started sketching it out. And I was like, have you ever had that experience with your prayer before?
Right.
No. And it's like, you don't think maybe there's a coincidence there, buddy? Right. Like you don't see why this prayer may have stuck around and is called the most important, thing and a foundation of orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. Like you don't see how that could be. Did any prayers that you learned as a Roman Catholic, and he's avid churchgoer, almost a zealotous, have any of them delivered that? And he it's almost his brain can't even process it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you're not taught in the Roman Catholic Church that you could even access God in that way. Mm-hmm. And so this is the, to be able to come, that's how I know it's real, because I can come from all the experiences that I have had and then have a spiritual father who's a mystic. And that practice has been, the ascetic practice is forefront in Orthodoxy. Mm-hmm. And so it's like to talk to an ascetic and they're like, oh, okay, here's this to read, but here's this also to do. Okay, this will be helpful in terms of your prayer practice. And then for it to actually have a giant effect, that's real. Mm-hmm. That's real.
Yeah, and the church fathers, they talk about being mindful and careful with the prayer, and you're sharing your experience. We're sharing our experiences, right? But if somebody just starts doing the Jesus prayer, some say do it 1,000 times, and be careful. Like if you start doing it, like I don't want to give advice, but find a spiritual father, read the church 100%. Fathers, and 100%. Find someone, because again, it's it's something that it's hard to describe. But it's important to have roots, right? In another way that I see it, like I ask people in interviews that I have, and how do you know this isn't another ideology? We were so excited about Taoism or whatever it is. How do you know that you're just not excited about something again? In 10 years from now, you're going to be looking at this and be like, yeah, I was, trapped into this religious thing or whatever it is. How do you know that? And one of the real ways that I've seen it affect my life is the fruits, right? You can tell the roots by the fruits, and the fruits, I mean, the relationships that I have in my life with my wife, with my son and my daughter, and my newborn, with the people at work, with my mother and father, healing relationships with my neighbors, with people that I just meet on the street, right? You have real dialogue with people instead of having empty conversations or just, superficial conversations. It gets real quick. And you see people and you meet them where they're at, and they meet you where you're at, and you care about them, right? And that just nurtures you, and it builds relationships. So something that has really been a kind of a rudder for me is paying attention to the nature and the quality of the relationships that I have with those that are closest to me, and then those that I encounter in the world. And that is something that is a lightning rod in terms of understanding if I'm aligned appropriately, if I'm connected to the highest high, and not just another ideology. Because idolatry is ideology, right?
Yes,
whether it's money, sex, power, wealth, status. You can make orthodoxy an ideology. Yes. You can make, anything, right? It's to be careful and develop that discernment and use the knowledge of the elders, of those that have gone before. We treat them, we house our elderly in our civilization. They say you can tell the civilization, but how they treat their elderly, and what do we do to them? It's it's like they are the most important resource, and we house them, and they're not valuable to us anymore. We can't extract capital resources out of them anymore. We house them as a whole, and we wonder why. We wonder why what's happening in our world now, right? To sin is to miss the mark. To sin for a long time, right? To miss the mark, your relationships will start to destroy. If as a civilization, you miss the mark for a long time, right? God will send the flood, right? The flood is just chaos, right? And it's interesting that the scientists, they say that global warming, that a flood is coming. And we don't believe the old religious stuff about a flood. But unless we change our behavior, a flood is coming. Really? You're not going to see that you're saying that a flood is coming, that, Florida is going to be underwater unless we change our behavior. You're not going to see what you're doing and what you're seeing here. It's like, it's kind of profound, man. And I guess we can kind of, get into a little bit of the questions here. I guess, when you see what's happening with the, I can't even say it, I don't want to be taken off YouTube, the coronavirus, and then the response from it, and the obviousness of the dereliction of duty of leadership at all levels. It's obvious to everyone. It's obvious. It's got to be obvious even to our leaders. And yet we progress along. And not only that, we double down. It's like, whoa, this is a lot of people are waking up to what's happening because of this virus and what it's done. It's accelerated a lot of things that were already underway. And this idea of the apocalypse, right, which is the unveiling of that which was hidden, right? And the end of the world is at the end of a world, right? And at the beginning of a new one. And I think that we're in the in-between stages here. What does the word apocalypse mean to you?
Yeah, this has been a big theme of my life and what's been revealed to me, pun intended, over this time. I mean, that is it. I actually have a section in this new book where I talk about the difference between invention and discovery. And of course, discovery is the same word as revelation. Uncover, discover. And invention is in venire. It's actually to come into. So it's like change, where you come into something, versus discovery, revelation, where it was there the whole time. And that's a really important thing to understand about the nature of revelation, is that anything that's being discussed is there. This is just allowing you to see the pattern. So the pattern is in existence, and it just lays it bare. It allows you to see it. And so if you talk about all of the curses that are brought down, whether we talk about locusts, plagues. So we've got a plague. Well, what does a plague do? A plague lays bare earthquakes, right? The typhoons that happen here. What does it actually lay bare? It lays bare all of the places that you have been willfully blind and you have not given attention, as Jordan Peterson would say. The crisis says what you have ignored that you should not have ignored, because it is only a crisis because you have done that ignoring. So, for instance, we have typhoons here. The typhoons come through. Like I'm in a building like right now, and all the buildings that are worth anything here, the first thing people ask is, oh, you're going to move into a place? Concrete house? Yes. Concrete roof or tin roof? Because when the typhoon comes, everything with the tin roof is basically exploded. It's gone. So you have to build a full concrete building. And the symbol of the people here, the Chamorro people who have been here for 3,000 years, if you look at the flag of the Commonwealth of Northern Marianas Islands, which is where Saipan is, what you see in the middle is a stone pillar. It's called the Laddie stone. And this is everywhere here. It's the symbol of their people, is this stone. And you can go to the islands, the other islands, like in Rhoda, which is a smaller and more mystical island. And you can go and you can see the old quarries of the last king. And these stones, not fully unquarried, giant megaliths. So they would build these massive, and their entire culture was built on these stones, because there's terrible termites here. So every year you get a locust plague, basically, of termites. There's a season where the termites come and they eat everything that's wood. Metal rusts almost immediately. Like within a year, if you have a metal table outside, it's rusted and it's fallen apart. The only thing is stone. You build in stone, and that's for the typhoons too. But it's so, you look at how difficult it was for them. They had to find the location, and then they're literally, they would chisel the thing out and then chisel under it from a literal rock face that's sitting there with stone tools, Stone Age tools. The time and effort that they would have to put in before anything, the attention that they would have to put in before anything. And so what is Revelation really saying? What is the book saying? What is Revelation all about when these crises come? Is that you've been ignoring all of this whole time. And this is going to be the result of you ignoring. And that, how do you not ignore it? How do you prevent that from happening? Well, you find a system that helps you to not sin. You find a practice that allows you to hit the mark reliably. And that's Christianity properly practiced. That's the Jesus prayer. I am a sinner. I'm going to miss the mark. But over and over and over, I am crying out. I'm crying out to the sovereign, saying, I am going to miss the mark, but I recognize I'm going to miss the mark. And my covenant with you is that I'm trying to no longer miss the mark. So have mercy on me, meaning give to me the strength to not miss the mark, the strength to discern the target, the discernment of the target, and the strength. Because if you don't have that and you keep missing the mark, something will come and reveal. And so we got a plague. And the plague revealed the problem. And those who have missed the mark, everybody's trying to not miss the mark. This is the one thing that you can notice. So although we will talk about what's happened with this plague, and we can say, oh, well, the plague is not that serious. What's really serious is everybody trying to it revealed that we've all missed the mark. But then the question is, well, how do I hit the mark? But you don't have a system to stop sinning. You don't even have the discernment of where the target is. So we have everybody firing off. And then they're like, no, the target is here. The target is if everybody wears a mask. They just start firing arrows. And it's like, that actually what you're firing at right now is the economy. You're hitting the economy because you got your eyes closed. No, it's over here. It's over here. And then it's like, no, it's that everybody gets a vaccine and we need to get them through right now. And so that means they don't go through the full testing process. Well, what you're aiming at is people's health and fertility in the future. No, it's over here. It's over here. It's over here. It's over here. And then it's like, no. The answer is the target is we need to track everybody so that we know where everybody's at. And it's like, start firing. It's like, that you're firing at the freedom of your society, because as soon as this is in place and a tyrant comes into power, you've just given him the ultimate tool. And so now every true tyrant is going to want to get control of that. You've just basically set up the ring from Lord of the Rings, and now you know that they're all going to be going after it. No, it's over there, tracking, shoot at it, eyes closed. And it's like, how do you open your eyes? You have to find a system that is built for you to see. And so God came down as a man. I've been looking at this Johannine Pentecost, right? So the Pentecost in John, not the one in Acts, but the chapter 20 of John after the resurrection. And I started looking at it again because Paul VanderKlay basically used it as a criticism, I think, of me and the way that I'm talking. Because at the end, when Christ says to Thomas that so you have seen and believed, but blessed are those who have not seen and yet believed. And it kicked off to me that I was like, I think he's using that wrong. And if you go back and you look, he's not talking to anybody in that chapter, because, Mary Magdalene comes in, she sees that the tomb is empty. She runs off to Peter. She says to Peter, tomb is empty, tomb is empty, tomb is empty. And he and another apostle run over there. And then they look in and they see that, yeah, the linens are there, the tomb is empty. And it says, after they saw, they first had to actually go in. They didn't just believe her that the tomb was empty. They go in, they see the linen down there, they see no body. And it says, then they believed. They saw, they believed, they went back to their house. So that was all it took for Peter to believe that he was risen. But he still needed to see that the body wasn't there.
Mm-hmm.
So he saw and believed. He didn't believe without seeing. And then Mary still doesn't believe. Mary Magdalene. She starts weeping. And then she sees two angels. And she still doesn't believe. And they say, why are you crying, Mary? She says, oh, they took the Lord. They took his body. And then Christ is like, okay. And he appears in the tomb with her. And it says that the scripture says she thinks he's the gardener. And she says, oh, did you take the body? Give it back to me so that I can bury it properly. And he says, Mary, Mary. And she says, oh, it's you. And then he says, go tell the rest of them that I'm risen, but don't touch me because I'm not there all the way, but go tell the rest of them. And then we don't know, we don't know what she says because we don't get that from John. But then that night they're all scared and they're locked away. They're scared of the Jews, it says, who might come for them. So obviously they didn't really believe her. And then he shows up and says, peace be unto you. But they still don't believe it's him. And so they have to see, he shows them the wounds. And then they believe, and then he blows the Holy Spirit onto them. But Thomas wasn't there. Right? And so Thomas comes back and they're like, Thomas, he's risen. He's back. And Thomas says, listen, all you did was see the wounds. I need to put my hands in the wounds. I need to touch him and put it in. And you know what? He comes back and he doesn't deny that to Thomas. And he doesn't even say, Thomas, come on, you need to just believe without. He's like, no, touch. Here, you need that from me. If you need that from me, touch me. Put your hands in the wounds. And then he says and Thomas then believes more than anybody else. And we actually see this in history because Thomas went all the way to India. And we know this because there are St. Thomas Christians who have been in India who practice the Syriac rite. And it scared the Portuguese when they showed up and they were like, wait, how are there Christians here? Practicing this old rite. It said that Thomas even went to China. And to me, it's like when Paul used that criticism of me because I said that the experience was important to me, it's like, one, Christ has never denied the experience. He's never denied that if you needed to see, and in your heart, it was, if you show me, I will be there. And I will go as far as you need me to go. He has never denied the experience to anyone, ever. And it's like, yes, blessed are those who do not see and yet believe. But guess what? They're few and far between. And they're certainly not the apostles. So maybe you're better than the apostles. Maybe you're better than St. Peter. Maybe you're better than Mary Magdalene. You believe more? Are you better than Thomas? Are you going to go and risk your life to spread the gospel in a foreign land to the strength that there are still people there 1,000 years later who are practicing the doctrine that you gave them? Are you willing to do that? I am. I'm doing it now. And I'm not, and I'm saying that because I'm being given the strength to do that, and I'm being told to do that. And it's the covenant that I have to make if I'm going to keep being given the experience. You know what I mean? So it's like, I think it's so crucial. It's so crucial in that regard that people understand that that is there. It's there to have. And that is the practice by which it's the only thing by which we can hit the mark. Because it's a real target. And the tradition says that everyone who has followed to hit that target, the world has been a better place because of that. It's not like where else is it? Because everybody's missing. What's been revealed is that we have been ignoring. We've been willfully blind, and I've been willfully blind. I'm in Saipan, like Jordan Peterson says, like, if the world is bad, it's because you're not sufficient. You know, like, I'm in Saipan partially, not totally, but I'm partially in Saipan, and this plague happened partially because I missed the mark.
Mm-hmm.
And really, it's like, I personally, I really contributed. I was on a TV show that millions of people watched, where I led a life of an example that I would say was now is an example of missing the mark. Did I know that at the time? Kind of, not really, not in the way that I know it now. But it's like, yeah, I contributed. I definitely contributed to this whole thing in a real measurable way for me. And that's part of my repentance, is to recognize that. And it's like, am I willing to go as hard towards helping people to hit the mark, and towards hitting, most importantly, toward hitting the mark myself? Because that's really the key. Like, am I willing to go as hard at focusing and hitting the mark and being guided by his hand as I was to be guided by the hand of something else and my own ego? Mm-hmm. And if we can do that, that's how we come out of this. Yeah, if we say that that's the revelation, that's how we come out of it.
I think just to speak a little bit to hitting the mark, right? So if you're missing the mark, right, you have to miss the mark to discern the mark, right? As long as you understand that you're aiming towards something. And I think that the experience is necessary, but not sufficient, right? Once you have the experience, right, you love God with all your heart, but what's the second part, right? You love your neighbor as God loves you, as yourself, right? So you have the experience, you've touched the wounds. Now, you know, what do you do with that information, right? If you become a master archer, right? What do? You have to show others. It's about spreading. It's about showing others. It's about showing up for others. And I think when you look at what's happening from a global perspective, you're like, what am I going to do? Like, what do you mean? Like, this thing is just going full bore here, right? And, you look, you see what's happening. What can I do? You have to act where you are with what you've been given, right? And just share with others, right? Act locally, build networks, build community where you're at, and then connect with community all over the world, right? This connection that I didn't know you existed a week ago. And now I'm having a extremely meaningful conversation where I'm getting, edified, spiritually edified. And I didn't know you a week ago, right? And then somebody will see this, right? And we'll continue to have these kind of meta hyper conversations, right? Which it is like a mustard seed that's growing, right? So when we look on our screens here and we see the complete absurdity, right? And when we turn the screen off, when we turn the matrix, we plug out of the matrix, and I go play with my daughter, right? And that love that I have there is real, right? It's not they're not organisms. They're, it's just this way that we kind of look at the world. You have to have this faith, because things are going to get worse before they get better. Things will continue to get worse, at least from a global perspective, before they get better, right? So I think the idea is, you have the experience, what do you do with it, right? And I think those two things, love God with all your heart, right? Connect to the infinite. Anything else you connect to will become an ideology. You start aiming at masks, they become ideologies. You're not a good person unless you wear a mask. And now it's the same thing's going to happen with the vaccines. You're not a good person unless you get a vaccine, right? Because it's like all this lower, if you need to connect to the infinite, connect your heart to the infinite, and then share what you have selflessly. Empty yourself out like Christ did. We're here to be like Christ. What is theosis? God became man for you to become God. Deal with that. Don't just conceptually think about that or just talk about it. What does that mean? Follow Christ. Follow the commandments and share them with others. And they'll say, you tell people this, oh, I can't be like Christ, or, well, do your best, aim appropriately. You're going to miss the mark, but aim appropriately. And watch what happens in your life. Watch what happens with the relationships that you have. I think that's kind of what I got from that understanding, right? Because I've had those experiences, and people, it's like, will people get it without having the experience? I don't know. It's not up to me to find out, but I'll love them with all my heart. like they're my kids. Love everybody like they're your kids. Impossible to do, but try it. Try it. It's it's really an interesting conversation. If you have a little bit more time,
Yeah, I've got time for sure.
Something that let's take all that what we just discussed right now, right? And I'll just throw a couple quotes out here in your book, Render unto Caesar, Prophecy, Prophet, and Proof of Work. You said you were driven deep into the philosophical guts of Bitcoin, and you say Bitcoin led me to a better understanding of money, God, and myself. You seem to be saying that Bitcoin is the currency of the kingdom of heaven. Take me into the philosophical guts of Bitcoin, please. Giving all that we just said.
So the first thing is the understanding of the pattern of the Trinitarian God that I've received, mm-hmm. and how it maps onto Bitcoin is, I think it's very important. And it's also potentially a path for those who are materialists to start to come to an appreciation of the mystery and the power of the Trinity. And so materialists, like you take a scientist and you say, okay, the nature of reality, let's discuss it at the highest level, like not mathematics, not physics, but let's go with the axioms that underlie everything that you're into as a scientist. And basically the axioms lay out something like this. Reality consists of a set of rules that are eternal and fixed. We can never fully know what those rules are, but we know that they exist. And at best, what science is working toward is to, over time, have a broader and more distilled view of what those rules are. Any scientist is like, absolutely. The mm-hmm. materialist is like, absolutely. We're talking the laws of physics, the laws of aerodynamics, whatever they are. They say it's the laws of physics. Now, over time, you could say, yeah, but Newtonian physics doesn't really explain everything in the universe. So we have quantum physics, and those laws are a little different. And when you get big and small, and it's like, okay, all you're saying is that Newton didn't have access to be able to know what all the laws were. And so our understanding of the laws evolve over time, although the laws themselves stay fixed, right? Easy. Any materialist can go with that. All right. The second thing is probability, entropy, and an idea of the changing of states mm-hmm. throughout time. So what you have is you have an interaction between the fixed laws of the universe and then a force that the materialist would call entropy or probability, such that things can change in their state over time. So you don't have laws that are fixed. You have emotion. And this is going to be space-time, gravity. All of these things are recognized as a force. Mm-hmm. So you have rules, and then you have a force. And while we'll say there are forces, that really there's a recognition that, well, there's probably an uber force, and all of these sub-forces are parts. And this is what the people at like CERN are looking for, mm-hmm. right? These elementary forces and particles, right? Okay. So what do we have? We've got order and chaos. We've got cosmos and chaos as understood by the Greek philosophers. And then there's a third part that's obvious and that was ignored for a lot of time, but you get into quantum physics and they're like, yeah, but when you introduce the observer into this mm-hmm. whole thing, it changes. Like, it's not just the forces and then the rules. There's this observer piece that's weird. Consciousness. Oh, consciousness is a part of this. Logos. Mm-hmm. So order, the fixed and unchanging order, chaos, probability, and all of that, but mediated and able to be seen and observed by Logos. That mm-hmm. is the Father, the Holy Spirit, and the Son. Mm-hmm. This is a very, very evolved, complex, and sophisticated understanding of reality. It is to say that those church fathers who said the nature of reality is the Trinity, we're speaking at a level of understanding of reality that is as high or higher than the most advanced physicists that we have today. And that should be, so it's like, whoa. And then to say, oh, and here's a system for interacting with that. Here's a system for figuring those things out in a way that you can embody them, not to articulate them in theory and symbols and all of these things like the scientists are, and maybe this will work, but it's like, no, here's how you go into it, actually embody it for the betterment of your people and yourself and your family, and your life is better. Whoa. Whoa. That's how, right? You're like, how does that happen? And so then what is Bitcoin? Bitcoin is this really interesting system. It's a very interesting technology that is very misunderstood. It's not digital gold. People can go and read the white paper. It's a concept, and it's a concept about consensus, and it's a concept about reality and truth. And it is like unlike anything that has ever been able to be embodied by people and actually used as a tool. Because what you're really talking about is utilizing the rules. It heavily uses randomness. So it's big on being able to really prove randomness. Bitcoin mining is all about digging into randomness to find what you're mining for. Is you're mining for random numbers in a gigantic set. And the system for finding those random numbers is such that if you give me that number, we're all looking for the same, we've got the same basic place that we're starting. We each add a little thing. It's called a nonce. We basically add a little bit of change, right? So this little bit of entropy we add. And by adding that entropy, it changes what we mine out of a number that's as much as the number of atoms in the known universe. But we're looking for a small set of them, only a small set. And then if you find one of those numbers, you show it to all of us, and we can all verify, not knowing who you are, not knowing anything about you. It's like you could be in a bunker and know nothing about reality, but you show me and we can all verify without knowing each other or anything. We say, he found it. And it's a game, basically, where all of these individuals say, okay, whoever finds it can add transactions, and we will keep those transactions, and then we'll build on top of that and mine on top of that. And then we'll build on top of that and mine on top of that. And so what you have is, and how they agree on what transactions and what's valid in terms of what you mined is a set of rules called the consensus rules. And if you have different consensus rules, you're in a different coin. So the difference between Litecoin and Bitcoin, or Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash, or Bitcoin SV and Bitcoin Cash is consensus rules. If you change the consensus rules, you go off somewhere else. You don't continue building on this chain. So what do you have? You have order, a set of rules. You have chaos, this randomness that we could, provable randomness. But then what good is a Bitcoin network without, and what changes what's actually in the blockchain is the transactions being made by people. Actual human beings have to interact with it, logos. And so what you have is, it's like, whoa, there's a technology that is a direct map on of the Trinity, a direct map. And that is the sum total of the technology. Like, you can embody it in machines and everything, but it could be done by hand. Technically, this could all be done by hand. It's conceptual. And so, and it works. And it works without you even knowing what I just said. That's the crazy part about it. And somehow it's valuable. And people recognize that it's valuable.
That's what I was going to ask you. Where does the value come from? Right. So you're using order to mine chaos, and out of that chaos, you're pulling value. That value is in the ability to instill trust in people. Is ability for reciprocity to happen without there being the human element of deception, something like that.
It's not even about deception, because deception is not even possible. It's not even possible. It's a binary. This is either valid or it's not. This either follows the rules or it doesn't, which is a reflection of reality. I've got a banana tree over here. There's no amount of deception that will make that banana tree grow apples. The only one, it's God's creation and it's set. And now there are a set of rules by which maybe I can breed that banana tree and do some other things, and we could do genetics and we could play at this, but you're still not playing God. You're only just discovering the limits of his rules. That's all you're doing. You're testing the limits of his rules, but you are not God. And also, you also, by introducing that, have the chance of going off somewhere else, which is death. So you have the chance of that being poisonous. You have the chance of introducing something where that kills everything around it. You have the chance of doing all kinds of things, which is the vaccine, right? That's what's happening here, is that it's like, yeah, you can do it. You can, but like, do you know anything about it? Not really. Like, you can try to bend these rules, but that's just like, you can try to jump off, the Burj Al Khalifa and flap your arms. And just because it takes you a long time to hit the ground doesn't mean you're flying. And that's why Bitcoin maps onto that, is when if you try to play God with Bitcoin, you just die. It just dies. And you can't make any money. It's not valuable. And that's actually where the value comes from. Where the value comes from is an ability to create consensus in a way that we have never had before. So the challenge for humanity has always been, and the reason why money was created was, when you deal with your family, there's no idea of money involved. Your wife, your children, there's no idea that. So maybe you might say, I've made dinner 3 weeks in a row. Could you just make dinner one night? And it's like, cool. But when you were making the dinner, you weren't keeping like a tally of it and saying, well, this dinner, you're going to need to, repay me and all of this. And so that was most of human existence. We lived in tribes of under 200 people. And we knew, I'm going to see this person for the rest of my life. We work together and we get, and we're good. And it's a system of reciprocity. But you couldn't interact with the other who you didn't have that relationship with. So if they had something and you wanted it, the only thing you could do would be to raid them. And we see that was human history. You had yourself and you had the other. And so we got the idea of ourselves and the other built in. So we created money, because money allows us to, basically a form of trade goods that would allow us to go to the other and reliably give them this thing that they wanted, that we made, and make the exchange, right? And it settled immediately. No need for reciprocity. We just took it out. There's no need for us to keep a ledger or a track. Bitcoin basically solves that same problem, to where it allows us at a global scale to be able to have instant settlement. So therefore, we don't need to keep track of reciprocity, but in a ledger format. So in an abstract format, without creating any physical good, we can have this, but it's not money. It breaks off at the exact same place. So and the interesting thing about it is, it's a manifestation of the Trinity. It's not a manifestation of anything before it. So it's a manifestation of the pattern of the Trinity. And so if there was to be, it's this feedback loop. It's not that you would choose the money that makes the kingdom of heaven. Like I say in my book, money made civilization. And even in the Render Unto Caesar story, it's like, what is the relationship between Caesar and the money? Did Caesar mint the money, or did the money mint Caesar? Can you have a Roman Empire without the money? So the coin, the denarius, the main coin of the Roman Empire, denarius 10, so 10 asses. So an ass was like a penny. So it's basically 10 cents. That was 1 day's pay for a Roman legionnaire. So you think about, okay, the main unit of account within this empire is equivalent to 1 day's pay for a legionnaire. Can you have a Roman Empire without a legionnaire? It's like, no. The entire reason for Roman money, like you can't take it apart from the imperial conquest. So then you say, did Caesar mint the money, or did the money mint Caesar? And we could see the same thing going on in our financial system today. You look at these bailouts. What would happen to the government if they didn't print that money? If they hadn't printed these stimulus checks, it probably would have already been taken over. There probably would have already been a coup against them. Because no, this is what's keeping people. So you say, well, it's the lifeblood. It's the lifeblood. And so when you have a money that is, and it's not even a money, but when you have a system where all of this corruption is not even possible, like you have a system where you can't do all of that, then perhaps you can build the kingdom of heaven on top of that.
Does it eliminate?
Or perhaps it builds itself.
Does it eliminate usury? Does it eliminate this idea of debt? And what is the relationship between non-fungible tokens? Non-fungible tokens, right? You can't funge the value of something. It is the value of something. Is there a relationship there between NFTs and this technology? Is one before the other?
Yeah.
And who was Satoshi
the
Nakamoto?
Question,
yeah, go ahead. Who is he?
That's a good one, right? Satoshi,
I don't mean it like
knows.
actually
Nobody
name
knows.
him. I mean, he is giving, like, is he a prophet? Is he an alien? Are those, can those be one and the same thing? How is his identity not known? And so, this idea of this technology goes back to this idea of where does technology come from, right? What is the roots of technology?
Yeah.
What is the roots of civilization, right? Civilization was built from tools that were given to man to build tools to mine the earth, literally to go into the earth and bring out metals, right? What is the nature of technology? And does this change the nature of technology as it's been in framing, like Heidegger says? Does it change that? Does this change something about the nature of technology with this innovation or this discovery?
I think, yeah, it is a discovery. That's the first thing. So this is, and that's why, I that's a section in my book is invention versus discovery. Some technology is invented, but really that's when we see incremental change. So like the iPhone is an invention. The smartphone is an invention. This is a discovery. And it's got component pieces that are put together, but nobody knew that they could be put together like this. So that's a revelation. And each of those was a revelation. Each of those was a discovery, each of the pieces that's in there. So it's like a discovery built out of discoveries in a way. Some people think this was a cryptographer by the name of Hal Finney, who in a very, would he be a prophet? Perhaps. One of the interesting things about him is that, he releases this thing between October 2008 and January 2009. October 2008 is the white paper. January 2009 is actual software. And in this time, unbeknownst to him, he has come down with ALS, Lou Gehrig's syndrome, which over the next 4 years paralyzed and killed him. So he vanished. Like he came out with this and then was basically unable to work on it because he became paralyzed, trapped in his own body, and then vanished. And so a lot of people believe that's a pretty clear indication that he was Satoshi Nakamoto. He had been working on all of the pieces that go into it before that. It's written like him. He was, a lot of people think he was speaking to himself because he was also happened to be on the same mailing list. He was the recipient of the first transaction. He was the first other person to mine. He's the first person to use the term Bitcoin on Twitter. You can still go at Hal Finn is the Twitter account for him. And you can see running Bitcoin on the first day, right? That Bitcoin came out. He did a tweet that said running Bitcoin. So a lot of people believe that it was him. It makes a lot of sense. His family has not said. He had himself cryogenically frozen, which is also interesting, as though he might come back at some point in the future, right? It's got all of these pieces to it, let's just say. It's got all of these pieces. And this, does it change? So usury, the question of usury, the danger with usury, as we've seen in the sovereign, when it comes to sovereign money, because all money is created through debt now, fiat money. This is the Rothschilds' game that they figured out, which there's a book called Rise of a Dynasty, Nathan Rothschild, The Crucial Years, or something like that. It's rather short. Everybody should read it because it's really just revealing of the scams that Nathan Rothschild was running and how those scams basically turned into the global financial system that we have. It's not written in a way that is like, it's actually pro Rothschild, but it's all his letters and it's just matter of fact, super interesting. The problem with usury is, especially when you're talking about sovereign, if I say, okay, I'm going to mint $1 million worth of fiat, right? I'm going to print $1 million worth of fiat, but I'm going to pay that back with interest. It's like, well, this is what the 11th marble problem, as they call it, right? There's only $1 million. Where does the money for the interest come from? And the answer is, I'm going to print some more, right? And so you could start to see how, oh, this is a problem. This is
Ponzi
a big
scheme.
problem.
Ponzi
It's a Ponzi scheme. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
It's a scheme.
It's a
scheme.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to see, that's the 11th marble. There's 10 marbles. I loan out the 10 marbles and I say, you're going to have to return 11 marbles to me. Well, where does the 11th marble come from? There's only 10 marbles. I made 10. So now I'm going to make 11, the 11th one, and I'm going to go and I'm going to spend it and I'm going to get all the money back.
Is that what I'm going to derive it, right? Is that kind of the idea?
No, I'm just going to print it. I'm just going to print it. It's not even that complex. This is just the mechanics of it. Bitcoin does not allow that to happen. It's got a fixed issuance schedule. So you actually can't do that. And this is something that they've been trying to do in this DeFi space. But in the DeFi space, that's so they have to make brand new tokens. And this gets to kind of your NFT thing. So you have the capability to make new tokens. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. But there's a necessary base that is there. So you can create all of that fiat stuff and whatnot. You can do all of that. And they do, like with Tether and all of this. And you can create NFTs, which are nothing, literally nothing. It's just like, I'm going to make some arbitrary data and then make you believe that I've moved it into your control. And it's like, what? It's like I wrote something on a piece of paper that it's like, this is something. The guy who used to sell the Brooklyn Bridge. This is a receipt for the Brooklyn Bridge. Give me $1 million. Here's your receipt. Right. It's literally that. There's nothing preventing you from doing that. And this is a big reason. I mean, the end of my book is all about, the very last essay is it's called Tools of Righteousness. Because you're not being prevented from doing any of these things, but at the base is a truth. And then the sustainable behavior is you are going to have to find a path to righteousness because you're being given a tool. So with great power comes great responsibility. And unfortunately, Bitcoin is being used and crypto is being used in a very unrighteous way. I mean, NFTs are indulgences. That's the best way to understand them. NFTs are being used by the priesthood of Bitcoin to sell nothing. This was the reason why Martin Luther revolted against the Catholic Church, was because they were selling NFTs.
Interesting.
That's what an NFT is. And so, because what have they done? They've painted you a picture of purgatory. And then they've painted you a picture of you not spending time in purgatory. And they put a number on it. This is 1,000 years, not in purgatory. Here you go. Give me the money. I build a cathedral. Here you go. Give me the money. And it's like, first off, there's nowhere in scripture that says you can even do that. There's nowhere in the tradition that says you can even do that.
Mm-hmm.
So you're doing it in the name of. So I see these people selling, and some of the biggest proponents are some people who I had thought were defenders of righteousness in Bitcoin. I don't want to call them out by name, but if they watch this, they know who they are. That they're the same people who have been railing against corruption of the priest class, that at the same time, here come these NFTs, and they're like, oh, no, buy my old NFTs, or what, which was like a game to play to see the technology can be used to do this thing, which it can. But it's like, oh, but I have the opportunity to make thousands or millions of dollars. Tell me how Jack Dorsey selling the first tweet isn't the same thing as the Pope selling a get out of purgatory free card.
Mm-hmm.
They're the same thing.
So if Bitcoin, like, so I hear you actually. And so the adversary, the more true something is, right, the more it will be manipulated, right? The more it will shine forth to be manipulated. So when you say a priestly class that will use Bitcoin, which is this thing that, that will build the new, how do we discern, what do we do about this idea of that this beautiful, wonderful technology that gives us access to the new world, how do we defend it from the adversary?
By using it righteously. That's it. Same way as everything.
Mm-hmm.
By using it righteously, and then by teaching others and sharing with others the way to use it righteously, by spreading the good word. And the wonderful thing about this is that whether they know it or not, and it's been my own experience, that now what I know is, and interestingly enough, I've seen it also in people around me, especially people who are like heavy materialists, that I've seen them be able, through the righteous use of Bitcoin, to actually be able to be like, yeah, this Christianity thing, like, I can get with this. Like, approaching the Most High, I can get with this now. Like, wow, because they can embody the pattern. And they see that, like, oh, here is the embodied pattern of this. And yeah, it can be used properly and it can be used improperly. And like, wow, it's real and it's here. Although it's abstract, it enables something real in terms of value and real use and real, it liberates and it frees people. But you also have to fight against, there's a prosperity gospel in Bitcoin right now. That's what number go up is. Oh, you buy this and the number goes up. How is that any different than send me, I tell you, send me $300 and you will be blessed by the Lord. He will give you $900. If you send me $1,000, he will give you $3,000. Where's the difference in the pattern? That sounds like the exact same pattern to me. Exact same. And we know that that is not righteous. We know that that is wicked and a corruption of the message. There's nothing new under the sun, brother.
And it might even help people, right? The placebo effect is not the same as healing the heart, right?
That's right.
You might get an effect, which it might help you, but it's not the thing itself. Very interesting, man.
Well, this is that's actually really important. And especially with this NFT thing, because even my own associates, their response to me calling out these NFTs has been, well, but if people get, like some amount of pleasure and joy is worth something. So if people get some amount of pleasure and joy, and my response is like, you're even worse. By saying that, that's even worse, because that's like, then you're providing cover. You're providing cover for the wicked to say, well, yeah, but if they feel a little bit better, it's like, it's not a matter of that. It's a matter of living. It's not about feeling better. It's about not missing the mark, because Xanax. You feel better in the short time. Xanax makes you feel better.
Valium, painkillers, destroys lives, man. Just quickly, if you have 10 more minutes.
Please, I do.
You talk about fasting a lot, and I looked up, is it Derek Prince?
Yes.
So I watched a couple of his things. Very interesting. Pentecostal preacher. You called him a Pentecostal shaman. You talk about fasting, and I'm still missing the mark. I still have issues where, so I had was addicted to opiates years ago. And then I was on Suboxone for 7 years. It's a type of long-term type thing, to get off it, but it's very hard to stop it. So to stop it, I took this thing called kratom. It's like this Indonesian plant, and I take it daily. I still take it daily. And when I want to fast, but I'm like, I take this thing daily. Like, I can't, what am I, stop eating, but I'm still going to take this stupid thing. It's like, and I was talking to my wife about it, and she's like, well, maybe the fast will help you stop it. But it's this like deep embedded thing in me of, I have to take it because of this deep embedded experience of how horrible things were many, many years ago of me trying to stop it. So it's like, I take this plant. I've been taking it for 4 years, 5 years daily, a couple times a day, never more or less. So it's something that keeps me right. But I'm like, I'm missing the mark there because that's keeping me from, getting through that is having to take this thing. So I'm going to try the fast because of a lot of things that have lined up, and from hearing it from you and look into it. So it's like, tell me how did that fast work in you?
I don't even know why exactly I was called to do it, but it happened. It was introduced to me right at the right time, and everybody who I've met now since then who has discovered fasting, because obviously it's right there for us, in every tradition, everyone has said my story is similar to your story there, that you're kind of called to it, that it took a while in me for that. And my story is also the same in that it was a colleague of mine. I was contracting with Bitcoin.com, doing some work for them. And so one of their kind of higher ups over there, we were in a meeting, and this is 2 years ago. And he says, "Oh, excuse me if I'm a little out of it. I've been 4 days on a 7-day fast." And it had been calling to me in that way. It had been showing up in my life in different places. And so I reached out to him, and I was like, "Oh," and he helped me. And he said, how transformative it had been for him. It wasn't religious in any way, but he was like, "Man, I was a POS, man." He was like, "I was just out of shape. I was all this, and I felt terrible. And I started fasting, and it's changed my life." It changed his life. He's like, "It's changed my life." And I was like, "Yeah, I was called to it." And he gave me, the good basic advice for everybody is electrolytes is the key, so that you don't cramp, but do a water fast, no calories. Be sure to get some electrolytes. You can look up like snake juice online. It's like salt and water basically, and some other things. You make that. The 3-day fast, the thing about the fast and why maybe it's calling to you, and specifically about this habit that you have, is that what it does is it is a habit breaker. And physically, the 3-day fast actually resets your immune system, which it's resetting it's resetting your habits at like even a deep physical level, because the immune system is a habit system. If you think about it, like even the materialist understanding of it is that it's a habit. You have seen this thing before, you have reacted in a certain way, and therefore you can react in a certain way in the future. It's habits. And so it resets your immune system in a way that like it clears out dead white blood cells and does all kinds of very nice things and gets you back running at full steam. But I did find that it broke a lot of habits for me. Mental, sort of physical, certainly helped me to. I had been just drinking like crazy for years. Part of, professionally, I was expected to drink with clients. And when I was doing the TV show, we would film for like 6 weeks at a time. And we were basically drunk through the whole thing. I mean, the production crew was bringing us alcohol the second that we stepped onto the set, just because it just made things more interesting and the show funnier and more exciting, and took down our inhibitions. And so I developed a terrible habit, but I was completely functional. I mean, I was working out, my body still looked great. I was eating well, and it's professionally, things were going well. But my connection to anything positive, it was certainly keeping me from the Most High, no doubt. The decisions that I was making, it wasn't keeping me from the spiritual, because even the ancients knew that it's spirits, right? The alcohol, it's got a spirit, and the opiates have a spirit. It doesn't have to keep you from the spiritual. You are still in the spiritual. You're just disconnected from the Most High, right? So the fast helped me to have that reconnection. And I think that what's good about it is that if you go on a complete fast, what I would say is the suffering of the fast will probably drown out any thought of, oh, I need to go back on this kratom. And probably by the end of 3 days, you'll feel like, I don't even want it. This is my guess. But I do think 3 days is important. I mean, my longest is 7. I don't know if I'll ever do that again. It was very much like something that I did because there was a lot of turmoil in the particular Bitcoin community that I'm a part of, kind of what you would say maybe the church denomination. That's how these networks tend to be at the level of the priest class. And so I did it because, and thankfully so, like I did it, and I think it made a difference in the direction of the way that things went, if for nothing else than how I could advise the people who were making decisions, who were asking me to advise them, and perhaps averted a war. Didn't avert a conflict, but perhaps averted a bit of a war that dropped the value of everybody's coins. So it is, I definitely would say it is the practice, man. It is the healing practice. There's a great book. So I would suggest, maybe this will help you. It helped me, and I actually read it while I was on my first 3-day fast, is a book called The Fasting Cure. And it's actually by Upton Sinclair. If you know this guy from he's 1910s, 1920s, very famous kind of progressive, early American progressive, like union organizer. He wrote the book, The Jungle, famous. And he had written this fasting book. And it's from like 1918 that he writes this. And this is a time that like Kellogg is doing his thing. It's a time of great exploration in American culture. And he's writing this like, this is the cure. He just became this fasting person. And it's a great short book written from a completely materialist standpoint, which is helpful. And it's like, when those things line up, when the materialists are saying yes, and I mean, this is a commie. This is a woke. He's early woke, right?
Pre-woke, yeah.
Pre-woke, but atheist, early and all of that. Upton Sinclair. I mean, and so when the devout and the materialist, the mystic and the materialist both say, do this, it's the cure. Right. It's the cure. You know what I mean?
I mean, it's all the rage now, in the self-help space,
but that's intermittent fasting.
Yeah.
And that misses the point. So that's the junk food of fasting. Because part of it is like getting past the hunger, which basically happens on the 3rd day. The 2nd day is the day of hunger. So basically on the 3rd day, you start to get past it. When I was in the 5th and 6th and 7th day of my fast, hunger is not the word. That's not what it is. Certainly a level of fatigue, maybe tiredness, which you would want to call it, but also calmness, peace. Like, here comes something. This should be a crisis, but I don't have the energy to deal with that as a crisis. So it starts to really prioritize, which is interesting. This like, oh, I can't even get mad at this right now.
Did you sleep?
I can't even get up in arms. Yes. Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah.
That's like one of my fears.
Day 2, day
sleep,
3.
Yeah.
Day 2, day 3, you're going to sleep. That's what you're going to want to do. You're not going to want to be up and about. So it's what I didn't want to do. What's interesting, day 3, no interest in Twitter, which I find is because I'm like all at it, right? Habits, right? Yeah. Changing habits. And it's like, I could care less about Twitter. But what I was very into was, if I was coding, man, I was working. I was so productive. And I had a 3-day fast where I was delivered this protocol that's like crazy, that people were like, whoa, this is maybe the most important. Some people were like, this might be the most important thing in Bitcoin in like years. And it was just delivered to me. But that was, yeah, I was like working and building. I think what it does is it hones, it distills, it takes the noise out and takes you down to signal what's important. And there's I think from a materialist biological standpoint, the evolutionary biology idea is that your mind has evolved that when you're hungry to be single-minded in your focus. So you're hungry and it's like, you better find some food. You need to be focused. This is an evolutionary biologist would say, well, what's happening is your primitive brain is thinking that it needs to expend any energy that it has left, needs to be focused on a goal. Well, what is that? That's focusing on hitting the mark. So it's a path to teach you how to not sin. It's training wheels for not sinning.
It's encoded in the Orthodox liturgical life and in Lent, right? And it's like the self-help intermittent fasting. It's like, what are you aiming at, right? Right. If you're aiming inappropriately, the fast is going to be this cheap thing. But I think if you're aiming appropriately, and I don't know, because I'm not, fasting, right? If you're aiming appropriately, it's all about what you're aiming, what your attention is towards, And just a quick story, like, so this girl that I work with, young girl, very sweet, not going to church or anything, but conversations led up to me giving her an Orthodox prayer book. And up to 6 months later, she's like, James, you ever heard this thing called fasting? I'm like, yeah. She's like, I'm going to try it. I'm right now, I'm doing a 24-hour fast, and she's at work and she's all nervous and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going out down to the street. You want something to eat? She's like, it's 10:30. I got until 11 o'clock. She's nope, I'm going to do it. I'm like, okay. And then she did the fast. That weekend, she went and got a tattoo of faith on her arm. I'm like, oh man, just like that kind of, like, that's one of the threads that have come together. Like, oh, okay. Like you're getting pushed, and sending those, watching those Derek Prince things and a lot of other things that have come together. It's like through Lent here, I stopped drinking, functional drinking, but that wasn't like, I stopped drinking. It's not a big deal. I'm like, oh, I need more. I told my wife, I'm like, I stopped drinking. That's not it. I'm like, I need to address this thing here. And the things are lining up for that to happen, man. So, I mean, I think you played a big role in that. And again, popping up in my consciousness so quickly. And, you've been very, very generous with your time, man. I appreciate it.
It's been a pleasure. It's been a pleasure. Man. Thank you for initiating this conversation. And it's a chance to get into the spirit. And I mean, it's through these conversations that I even am able to explore it's through these conversations that things are revealed, So it's like, it's an absolute blessing. And it's also, I think it's the righteous use of this type of technology.
Yes.
It can be used so wickedly, but it can be used with such righteousness, because how else would you and I even be able to have a conversation, So it's like, we can use this technology righteously. And so like, I thank you for doing that, because again, it's like, it's an example. And those examples are important.
One of my main interests, and this would break off another hour conversation, is Marshall McLuhan and this understanding media. And can we reverse engineer these media structures that bring out the worst in us, suck our attention and, extract our attention for resources for a small number of people? Can we reverse that process? I don't know, but I think conversations like this are a chip away at doing that. And then think about the people that watch this and get insights, and then talk to their friends, and then maybe make videos about it. So God bless you, man. Vin Armani. Thanks. Anything you want to leave us with?
Dude, that's it. If people are interested in my book, they can go. It's theproofof.work. So theproofof.work.
I'll go ahead and link to it too.
Okay, great. Yeah. If they're interested in the book, it's only available for cryptocurrency. So if you've been looking for an excuse to figure out how this whole thing works and to use it in a righteous way, here's an opportunity.
Now it's time to dip your toe.
Yes.
Dip your toe in.
Provide you that.
I'll link to it, man. I'll link to a couple of other stuff and other conversations. And again, man, God bless you. And thanks so much. Enjoy your day with your beautiful family and the beautiful place that you're in, man.
God bless you, James. Enjoy your day with your family as well.
Thanks, man. Talk to you
Thanks.
soon. Yep.
Talk to you soon.